agree to, there we go, this webinar being recorded. Welcome everyone, happy Friday. It's March 10th. Happy belated International Women's Day 2 days ago. Let there be peace in this world for everyone, not just for women. And today, on March 10th, we are welcoming our dear colleague, Evgeny Dengub from University of Southern California, who used to be my neighbor in Massachusetts, and now lives across the country on the other coast, and who contributed so much to ACTR establishment of the ACTR professional development programming and to other initiatives. So it's great to have Evgeny back. We gathered today to learn about ungrading, and specifically ungrading in the language classroom. And this is the continuation of the conversations that we've been having since the start of this academic year, since the fall, which centered around diversity and inclusion and inclusive teaching in the Russian language classroom. So it's a great honor to welcome Evgeny back to ACTR webinar series. And in case you don't know who Evgeny is, he is a teaching professor of Russian and director of the basic language program in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures at the University of Southern California. He's also the director of the Center for Languages and Cultures at the same university. He is the co-author of 3 Russian language textbooks, and I think everyone on this call, on this webinar, knows which textbooks we're talking about: Étagé, Panorama, and Russian for Advanced Students, his first textbook. Étagé and Panorama both received EDSIL prizes for best contribution to language pedagogy. Evgeny also has served as the director of the Institute for Teachers or Teachers of Russian at Middlebury College Russian School, funded by the StartTalk grant, and is directing this program this year again. And I already mentioned his EDSIL awards for best contribution to language pedagogy, but he also has awards from MLA for scholarship and a service award from the ACTR. So welcome, Evgeny, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Irina, for this.
We're all ears.
Thank you for this very generous introduction. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's such a great joy to see so many, well, see and know that so many of you are joining and watching it later. I'm going to share with you my ideas, my experience with ungrading, but first I want to share with you this story when actually Irina and I went to Assessment Institute this past fall, which happens every year in Indianapolis. And I highly recommend checking out this Assessment Institute that hosts this conference, especially if you're a program director or chair of your department. So they host a variety of sessions, not just on language, and actually not on language, but on assessment in general. But what was interesting for me was this presentation done by folks from Wabash College, and I didn't know actually about this study, but apparently it was a famous study. For many years. These scholars looked at the outcomes, learning outcomes, and they were looking at what kind of what of these outcomes come from, what affects those learning outcomes. But the title of the presentation was, "Is the learning juice worth the assessment squeeze?" why we're leaving the assessment game and moving on to learning improvement and student success. So basically, these folks were saying that they've done this study, they were looking at assessment and outcomes for so many years, but now they're done. They are focusing on, focusing on the learning itself. They're focusing on the success of the students, and that resonated so well to me. It's like, wow, that's, I'm glad somebody said that, because that's what I was thinking about a lot in the past, years. And I felt like, our field, education, language learning in particular, from my perspective, is over focusing on assessment. How are you going to assess this every time? That's the question you're going to get every time you're talking about something new at every conference. Like, what is the assessment? How do we assess students? What are the outcomes? So that overemphasis on assessment and outcomes, I think, is detrimental to most important thing we do in the classroom, which is learning and teaching. So, I'm glad those folks from Babash College said, well, not doing this anymore. I'm probably not advocating for abandoning assessment, but let's see if we could rethink, at least, look at it critically, but specifically start with grading, ungrading, and I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts. Hold on a second. So, apologies. Try this again. Okay. Are you seeing my slides? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So, a few more words about my struggles as
yeah. I'm sorry, just to interrupt you
Right.
for a second. I think maybe you should stretch it out more to the right, because we're seeing a lot of
okay.
open tabs, or open windows rather. And now, yeah, and now to the.
Hold on a second. I don't know what's happening.
It worked better before.
Okay, let me try it again. Is this good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So my struggles as an educator, I always struggled to how to decrease the level of stress in the classroom. Russian, as we all know, is not the easy language. So students are naturally stressed about learning Russian, excelling in school. So how do we keep our students comfortable? At the same time, how can we be fair to students of different proficiency levels in one classrooms, including heritage students? Because very quickly, starting semester two, even in the first semester, our students quickly become of, their proficiency levels are different. So how do we encourage students to learn at their own pace, on their own terms? My wife, Susanna Nazarova, taught, at some point she taught a first year class, and one of her students was struggling with alphabet for a year or even two. So on the quiz, she would always get a 4, 5%. And then when she would get 6 or 7, she would say, that's a progress. So, and it was, it seemed like she was not learning, she was failing the class, but she was still learning. And she was really persistent, and she was really celebrating those, extra 5% she would get on the quiz. So, and she was doing it, and she eventually, got into a graduate program in one of the best universities in the States. So how do we allow for this learning on their own, at their own pace for students who really are really struggling? How do we encourage students who struggle to go on? And how do we make students accountable for their own learning? I've never felt comfortable being a vоспитатель in the classroom, being this disciplinarian who punishes students for missing deadlines or for not coming on time or for submitting homework late. That was always kind of a least favorite part of my job, and I felt like I shouldn't be doing this. And I wanted students to take risks and make mistakes, and discourage them to use Google Translate. And now, we're all facing artificial reality, and it's a serious factor. I was playing with AR right now, so now you could, you can clone your voice and record anything in any language, basically. So students will be submitting their own answers in their own voice, said in perfect Russian. So how do we discourage this? And ta-da, ungrading is one of the answers, is one of the strategies, one of the tools that I've used to address this struggle. So, by the way, I would like to acknowledge my colleague Lori Mesruban, professor of Spanish in the Department of Latin and Latin American Iberic Studies at UC, with whom we've been working on this project, on this topic. So she also contributed. Well, we are basically co-authors of this talk, and together she and I kind of coined this working definition of ungrading is decentering grades in order to focus on learning. And decentering can the range of decentering, the degree, extent of decentering could be maximum. If you work, for example, in Evergreen College or Hampshire College in Massachusetts, the whole institution does not have grades. So if you work in a place like, USC or, most places, so you still need to grade, but it's in our power to decent the grades in our own language classroom. So once again, it's decentering grades, but not just to decenter grades for the sake of decentering grades, but we want to focus on learning, to make learning the primary element of our classroom. So what does scholarship on grades tell us? Grades may not always accurately measure learning. They can have adverse effects on student motivation, and they're not a good form of feedback. Just, giving student B is not a feedback, is not a good form of feedback. Grades may encourage an emphasis on quantitative aspects of learning, but they depress creativity, foster fear of failure, and undermine interest. They do not enhance motivation. Instead, grades enhance anxiety and avoidance of challenging courses. On the other hand, providing narrative or written feedback without an associated grade could lead to more positive student experiences. So that's what scholarship tells us about grading and ungrading. So once again, why ungrading? Ungrading allows us to focus on learning and the learner. It helps us make the learner the active agent of the process. It helps me change the power balance. I'm not that keeper of A's and A pluses anymore. We are working together with a student. And at the end of the day, it's their karma if they decide they deserve, A, while, I might think it's A minus or B plus. If they need that A, I have no problem giving them an A. And helps me removes the disciplinary aspect from the process, and is a more flexible approach to take into account the new reality. We all live in this post-COVID world, and it's changing. It's changing our it's affecting our, policies and ideas, what attendance is and what participation is, stuff like that. So, and it is in the tradition of the what I call humanistic teaching, teaching as a dialogue, creating the supportive and flexible environment, um, trusting student, relying on our code system, and addressing our students' diversity. The fear, I think, is that students will, if you just stop grading or remove grades, students will stop doing the work. But when I think about my students, or life in general, I like the this normal distribution metaphor. And everybody who studies statistics, knows that normal distribution tells that, well, the majority of this 80%, 70% of our sample, is, in the kind of a normal range. We'll have outliers on both ends. There will be people, if we talk about students who will always come to class, who will always do the work, will never cheat, no matter what we do, grades or not grades, carrots or stick, there will be those отличники, отличницы. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are the other kind of outliers who will do what they want to do, regardless of our grading policies, regardless of, tricks we come up. There's always something off with those students. So, but most of our students, the majority of our students are normal students. They want to learn. They come to school, they come to college to learn, and they are there because they want to. And again, we all teach in different contexts, and folks who teach in middle and high school, they may have their own situation. I can only speak about college. So in all the places I worked at, and I used ungrading in small private liberal arts college, in a state university, in a large private university, online, offline, immersion, non-immersion. And I guess I was fortunate, but I want to think that it's kind of it's more or less a norm. I had students, most of my students wanted to learn, were interested in learning, and they would respond positively, or I could engage in a dialogue with them. So most of my efforts will be directed towards that 80% of students, and they respond fine to policies like ungrading. So ungrading both is a philosophy and a set of practices. It still relies on clear criteria and rubrics, but there's just no numbers or letters associated with ungrading. It needs quality instructive feedback. That feedback could have different, shape and form, but it's a crucial piece. But I would argue that feedback is crucial for if we want to ensure good learning anyway. It involves student self-reflection, self-assessment, or peer assessment, depending on your style, on your preferences. And it's an invitation to explore and make mistakes. Students are encouraged to do redos and revisions so that they learn the material. We like to do frequent check-ins with students by emails and one-on-one conferences, and it still conforms to institutional requirements. In all these places I taught at, we would still have to give a final grade. So final grades is a thing, but none of what I did violated, and most likely it won't violate in your program any policies or rules. So whatever you do kind of before you give the final grade is more often than not is in your power. Ungrading is not one size fits all. Again, we all teach different kids, different institutions, and it's not an easy or a lazy way out. And we still require work to do. So what didn't change in my classroom when I started on grading? High standards and expectations didn't change. And let me give you an example of the course policy language that I include in my course policies. So I say that this is a course where everybody can and should get an A. I don't want you to stress about the grade. I know that you are here because you want to speak Russian better, and this is your primary objective. As long as you come and actively participate in each class, do your best homework, submit all your assignments in time, learn new vocabulary, and complete the test, then you will get an excellent grade. Obviously, you should never cheat. That is, use machine translation to translate more than a word or a short phrase, have someone write your essay or responses, look up things during closed book assignments, etc. I do have expectations of what good work is, and I will do my best to communicate them clearly to you. In the most general sense, I expect you to do the best you can to push your limits and gain a bit more language every day. Every assignment must do what the directions state and be complete. It must provide answers to all the questions and prompts and must show a good faith effort. I want you to be able to say each week that you know and can do more in Russian than you did a week ago. Your progress in Russian is not measured by your grade, but by how much more you can understand and express, by the growth of your vocabulary, and by improving the accuracy of your spoken and written speech. So that's the tone I set. That's on the first page of my syllabus. That's my teaching philosophy that I explain to students. And as you can see, expectations are still there. I still expect a lot. I expect them to do the work, but just not in a graded context. So that didn't change. Formative assessments stay in, maybe even more formative assessment. This regular quizzes and tests, because you need to memorize vocabulary. You cannot not learn words when you learn a language, and that I'm telling this to my students, and I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna because humans are lazy, so if you don't have to, you won't. So let me help you by giving you regular quizzes, so that you have another incentive to extra incentive to memorize the vocabulary. So it's there. And again, final grade at the end is still there. What did change is grading of each individual assignment and introduction of the pass-fail system for most elements of the course, most work. So how do we get to that final grade? So there are different sort of systems, different approaches, portfolios, peer assessment, contract-based syllabus, self-assessment. I use the combination of the last two. So let me give you an example. So these are my requirements, an example of the requirements for an A. You must be on time, prepare for all classes. You may miss up to 2 classes unexcused. You should complete and hand in all the homework assignments. You may submit 1 or 2 assignments late. Complete all vocabulary quizzes. 80% of the words should be correct. You may retake quizzes with less than 80%. Complete all the tests. 80% should be correct. Submit all the test revisions. Submit all the self-reflections on time. So I have this set of criteria for each, A, B, C. And then at the end of the semester, and actually in the middle of the semester, I invite students to compare this criteria with what they do and suggest a grade. So here's an example of the final self-evaluation that I give to my students. Do you feel you've made a progress in Russian? What helped you learn the most in this class? Have you thought about the ways you learn? What was your initial reaction to the lack of focus on grades? How many classes did you miss for no good reason? How would you describe your engagement and effort in class? How much homework you have completed? Please suggest a grade for yourself. Please comment on your proposed grade and any other comments. So I give a similar version of this, a shortened version at the middle of the semester, and then at the end of the semester. And again, not all students give themselves an A. Some actually suggest a grade that's lower than I would give them. But in any case, if I disagree with the grade, whether it's higher or lower, I talk to students. And again, oftentimes I either forget something or don't know something or something, some unexpected reasons come up that I didn't think about, and students often convince me that, yeah, the grade should be higher than I originally thought it would be. Or they convince me that they've learned the most. Again, remember this student in Susanna's class who got 6 on the quiz. That was the top. This was the maximum she was able to learn at that moment. When I was in graduate school, we had a statistics class, and every Wednesday, was it Wednesday, Rena, or Friday? Wednesday, for 3 hours, we sat in this class. Our instructor, she was really nice. She would, buy us grapes, and we would eat, other fruit. So we would learn statistics, and I was sitting there clueless, absolutely clueless. I didn't know a thing what was going on. It was just way. So I remember that, one of the last weeks, and I thought, oh, that's what standard deviation is. And as you know, standard deviation is very basic concept in statistics. It's like, soft and hard vowels in consonants in Russian. So, but that was I couldn't learn faster. It took me 12 weeks to learn the standard deviation. And our instructor knew I would never be a statistician. I would learn as much as I could. So, and that student, she took her time. So maybe what we think is failing is actually winning and overcoming so much for that particular student, given their situation, given the health, given the learning situation, given the family situation, given the difficulty of the subject. So that humility, that sort of understanding, that empathy, compassion that Ben Rifkin talks about, so important, such an important topic for us, should be there, and grading helps me with that. So attendance, is difficult, right? I've always had a very strict attendance policy. You have to come to class. You just have to come. And I still encourage any way I can. I tell my students, well, that's what, we're here in class. It's an important part of the work. But now with COVID, every sneeze, every little cough, students stayed home, and maybe rightfully so. But what do? We cannot require doctor's note. I didn't require them before COVID, but now it's just so much more difficult. So, well, if you're sick, stay at home. Well, that's rethinking the attendance policy is something that I think all of us have to do. But also allow students to prioritize their own time. Probably some of your students say, well, I didn't come to class because I had an important midterm exam, and our ego say, oh, well, this math exam was more important than Russian. How can it be so? But, students are different. And for some, it is much more, has much more higher stake than this Russian class. So, and that's fine. That's okay. Russian does not have to be a priority for all of my students. I want them to be, but it's okay if it's not. And like I said, majority of our students, if you create that expectations, if you communicate that importance of coming to class, and if your class work is the proof that students do need to come to class, then they will come to class. And they won't if they absolutely cannot. Participation can be replaced with reflection on how they're doing in class, how they engaged. Engagement, again, might look different on the outside. So we may think that student is completely elsewhere, or they are not listening, not participating, but we don't know what's going on. I had a student in my class who was sitting like this all the time. The whole class, she was just like this and this, and it took me a lot of patience to just not to say something in class. And I asked her to say after class, and I said, "What's up?" And she started crying. "Oh, I miss my family. I'm actually gonna switch colleges and move closer to my family." She was in complete distraught. She was so not together. Again, Russian was the least of her worries, because she was so much anxiety. So I don't want to punish my students who might have a hard day by insisting that they must talk and be engaged, and in the way that our classic engagement might look like, or the ideal engagement might look in my head. All right, quizzes and exams. In the ungraded classroom, they're still there. They're low stakes. Different people establish different baselines. My baseline is 80%. So if it's less than 80%, I ask students to retake, redo, whether it's homework or vocabulary quiz or test. And it usually takes one time. Although I might say, well, it's unlimited retakes. You can take it as many times until you learn. Again, my message to them, I want you to learn this vocabulary. I don't care. It might take you a week, might take you 2 weeks, but I want you to learn it. So please go back and learn. You might want to limit the time, because you don't want students to learn vocabulary from unit 1 when you're in unit 7. So you may say, okay, you have time until we start next chapter to take that quiz or retake the quiz. But usually students do it in one take and real quickly. All right, let me pause here and ask for questions. I'm going to talk about my students' feedback and a little research I did with students, but if you have any questions based on what I said so far, please let me know.
And of course, you can just unmute yourself and speak, or you can put your comments, questions in the chat.
Alina, Ira, are you gonna rule the?
Yes, are we going to share this presentation with us? Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Евгений, you can manage your own
Okay,
questions.
all right. Alina.
Здравствуйте. Спасибо за презентацию. У меня очень много вопросов. Я задам свой последний вопрос. Ничего, что я говорю по-русски? Или желательно на английском? Да, нормально. Как, Евгений, найти этот общий знаменатель? Потому что, когда вы описываете критерии оценки A, вы говорите, что студенты должны приходить на каждое занятие, активно участвовать. Но потом выясняется, что кто-то не пришел из-за личных обстоятельств. Да, we don't penalize them for this. Кто-то участвует, конечно, still engaged, но не участвует как бы активно. Потому что этот человек как бы, привык по-другому выражать свое участие. Как это все отслеживать? Мне кажется, у меня очень много вопросов в голове. То есть как мне отслеживать каждого индивидуального студента, и чтобы потом с ним еще обсуждать? Нет, вы тогда-то не участвовали такого-то числа, вот я вам не засчитаю. Или вот вы пропустили там несколько дней. Вот такой у меня вопрос.
Хороший вопрос, спасибо, Полина. Тоже буду на русском отвечать, да. В том-то все и дело, что мы хотим переложить, по крайней мере, часть ответственности на студента и сказать, что ты, дорогой, дорогая, отвечаешь, мы тебе даем как бы право, но с правом есть и ответственность. И проверять каждого студента не моя работа, опять-таки, я не хочу быть воспитателем, да. Если студент говорит, что он участвовал, что он был, делал и так далее, окей, верю, хорошо, да. То есть, если кто-то нагло врет, это на его совести. Я не хочу быть этим воспитателем для них. Но я хочу дать им понять, что мне важно, чтобы ты это делал, чтобы ты работал, чтобы ты участвовал, чтобы ты делал работу. И как бы я буду, как могу, у нас у всех, у кого 25 человек на занятии, у кого 5, у кого 3, да, то есть степень нашей вовлеченности в дела какого-то индивидуального студента будет разная. Но опять-таки, это bell shape, да, 80% of the students, да, 80%, там будет все нормально. Какие-то индивидуальные случаи, там будут проблемы, но в моей практике, что бы я ни делал, какие-то совсем плачевные случаи, они ничем я не могу помочь. А что касается конкретных фраз, это все требует постоянной доработки, да, и каждый раз мы находим какой-то изъян или какой-то более совершенную формулировку правила или там какого-то требования. Поэтому то, что мы делаем в этом семестре, может и будет, скорее всего, отличаться от следующего семестра. Как бы учимся на своих ошибках, и поэтому, что касается посещаемости, да, это сложный вопрос, поэтому там должно быть какая-то, да, как я с вами делился в форуме self-assessment, там было написано, да, посещал все занятия, за исключением каких-то очень важных причин, да, уважительные причины. Действительно, есть такое понятие, уважительная причина. Собеседование на работу – это уважительная причина, да, и если ты не пришел, не пришел.
А вы выставляете в канвасе или где-то?
Нет, ничего.
Что-то?
Не выставляю. Нет.
Не выставляете. Потому что
Можно
например...
Прошу прощения, я просто быстренько хочу добавить к этому, что, наверное, просто моя реакция на это такая быстрая, наверное, мы все-таки, у нас не такие огромные классы, не по 250 студентов, мы все-таки будем, это чувство того, был человек включен или нет, оно у нас есть, а пропустил он 3 занятия или 5 занятий, или 7 занятий, наверное, не важно для того прогресса. То есть если он пропустил больше 5 занятий, 10, мы, наверное, это просто будем знать, неважно, без отсчета этого.
Да. А включенность, спасибо, Ира, включенность занятия – это наша работа. мы делаем все, чтобы каждый студент был включен в работу, а если нет, значит, либо нам нужно лучше работать, либо у них такие обстоятельства, которые им не позволяют, да, что-то у них в голове, на душе. Сегодня день такой, когда они просто не могут, вот не могут. Но наша работа сделать все, чтобы все участвовали по максимуму.
Спасибо, спасибо. И просто как короткий комментарий, но я, например, в этой четверти убрала вообще посещаемость и участие. Убрала вообще. С такой мотивировкой, что если вы не приходите и вы не разговариваете на уроках, ну, тогда вы не сможете, собственно, да, сделать никакого прогресса, не будете разговаривать. То есть получается, что это тоже такой шаг в сторону ungrading, в сторону перекладывания ответственности на студентов, когда мы отказываемся от этой роли, наказывателя. Все, спасибо.
До меня дошла очередь, да, нет?
Татьяна, да, пожалуйста.
Да, здравствуйте, рада всех приветствовать, вижу знакомые лица. Евгения рада видеть.
Да,
Привет
взаимно.
по Хабаровску, да, Ирина вижу. Всем привет, очень рада всех видеть. Я хочу вставить свои, так сказать, 5 копеек. Я преподаю русский язык в корейском, в южнокорейском университете. И, видимо, у нас ситуация немножко другая в образовании. Очень-очень высококонкурентная среда в образовании, поэтому, ну, я работаю в одном из топовых университетов, поэтому оценка очень много значит при поступлении на работу, средний балл и так далее. Поэтому, ну, может быть, вы слышали, что здесь конкуренция начинается чуть ли не с детского сада, да? Вот, и есть такое понятие, как абсолютная и относительная оценка, и что касается абсолютной, это не проблема, да, это примерно то, о чем вы говорите. А вот относительная – это жесткая вещь, когда и преподаватели, и студенты поставлены в такую ситуацию, что ты не можешь поставить более, например, 30% A, 40% B, ну и так далее, да. В этой ситуации и преподавателю, и студентам очень сложно. И раньше у меня возникало очень много недопониманий, каких-то проблем, приходилось, студенты писали просьбы пересмотреть оценки, были апелляции, я им писала ответы, пересматривала, это была такая головная боль каждый раз при оценивании. В этом году зимой я думала и придумала, что я буду оценивать каждый их шаг, и на каждом уроке они у меня зарабатывают по нескольку баллов. 1 балл они посещают за посещение, 2 балла они посещают за домашку. Из этого 1 балл за выполнение домашнего задания, 1 балл за подготовку диалогов. То есть на каждом уроке они получают по 3 балла. И к концу семестра они уже видят, что они могут набрать определенное количество баллов даже посещением. Это подняло их мотивацию. Вы знаете, я вот сейчас наблюдаю, это очень здорово подняло их мотивацию. Конечно же, там остается часть процентов на промежуточный экзамен, часть процентов на финальный экзамен. И вот я также ввела систему ведения журнала. Каждый день они у меня ведут журнал, и я смотрю, то есть там 2 части. Одна часть рефлексия, то есть что они для себя, да, вынесли с этого урока. Это здорово повышает их. Вот только что Евгений сказал, что вовлеченность – это наша задача. Ну, не только наша задача. Я бы не хотела быть Богом и брать на себя 100% ответственность, поэтому часть ответственности я разделила со студентами. Часть моей ответственности – это подготовить им систему, журналы, да, вот как это все делать. А часть их ответственности – это заполнять этот журнал, вести, и это их ежеурочная ответственность, если можно так сказать, ежеурочная. И вы знаете, да, они вовлекаются, они ведут, и они вовлекаются. Очень хорошая рефлективная практика, которая также повышает их вовлеченность. Я, конечно, посмотрю, что будет в конце семестра, но я думаю, что апелляций у меня будет гораздо меньше. Ну, и, может быть, не будет, ну, конечно, может быть, и будут, вот, но, тем не менее, я думаю, что если мой опыт южнокорейский кому-то поможет в этом аспекте, да, буду рада, можете в дальнейшем задавать вопросы. Все, не смею больше отвлекать на себя внимание, простите, если была
Спасибо,
многословна.
Татьяна, да. Ага. Ирина, мы дальше идем или еще вопросы?
Нет, ну давайте мы, наверное, возьмем вопросы. Я уже написала, что у нас Ирина Когель сначала, потом Кристин. Я просто хотела всем напомнить, Татьяна, спасибо, что вы поделились, что у нас на следующей неделе, через неделю идет follow-up Teachers Lounge, как раз вот для того, чтобы обменяться опытом, поделиться материалами на основе вот этого вебинара. Так что давайте, может быть, мы позадаем вопросы Евгению, вот что-то еще, может быть, прояснить. И приглашаю всех, и, Татьяна, вы должны будете еще раз появиться на следующей неделе, чтобы вот это же рассказать.
Поделиться южнокорейским опытом, да?
Да. Ирина, пожалуйста.
Спасибо.
Thank you. I'm
Russian
sorry.
or English? Да.
I'm going back to English. So my question is, in terms of the things that you're still thinking about as 80%, has your understanding of what that 80% is and how you assess that on a test or otherwise, has it changed through this process? And what does it maybe look like? If you're not entering grades, are you giving them a ballpark when you get an assessment like an exam?
That's a good question, Irina. Thank you for asking it. For vocabulary quizzes, it didn't. So it's 80%. If you get 7 words out of 10, then you got 70, not 80. For homework, I guess I try to be, if a student is struggling and they did made a lot of mistakes, but still did showed progress, they 80% will probably be much different than student who is doing well. So that would be kind of my differentiation. But I don't think my idea of 80% changed with this practice that much.
Thank you. And then that follow-up is, do you track at all, or is it all their self-assessment?
No, I do track it. I do track it. So and I record it as much as I can. But again, I have a luxury of having small classes, and I don't have to often, but you can, and it's fine. And if you do, but you also want them to know that they should also be doing that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Kristen is next.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much for this. I will say I am a big believer in ungrading or self-grading in my literature, culture, film courses that I teach in English. I've been doing it for about 5 years now, and it has completely transformed my teaching for the better. But I have struggled with how to incorporate that into the language classes. So this has been really helpful. But I a couple of questions, and for me, I keep thinking about transitioning or articulating to the next level of language. How do you ensure that a student who completes, say, Russian 101 with an A is ready to go to Russian 102? We at the same time, I can think, well, we already have such a mixture of abilities in our intermediate and advanced class that maybe I'm worrying about nothing. And then I also wonder about sending a program abroad, where of course there will be placement tests, but if it's required that, okay, you need to have completed 4 semesters of Russian, and the student has done that on their transcript, but again, like the situation that you were talking about with Susanna's student, has really struggled. Can we kind of toss them into that more intense environment, and is that responsible for us? And then finally, and I'm sorry for so many questions, but finally, what do you do if your colleagues are resistant to this approach?
Thank you, Kristen. These are great questions. In terms of preparing our students for next level, like I said, I have high expectations for progress, for what I want my students to achieve. And students can still fail a class, even in ungraded. And some of them did. Some just stopped coming to class or stopped doing the work, regardless of the system. So in that case, they would fail the class. They would get an F or D. If they get a C minus, I mean, realistically, would we not let them into next level? Probably not. We all care about enrollments. Plus, we never know what students might do, during the break, or how they will feel in the next semester. Maybe this semester was kind of a fluke and they just were sick or didn't have motivation because they were busy with something else. I often find it the case. So there was something else going on. It's not just they lack of abilities. It's just something else was going on that prevented them from doing the work. As far as and the same thing applies to study abroad. That student I was talking about, she went to Latvia and she was having a great time, even with just barely learning the alphabet. And she was, we never know how that new environment would change their learning. Maybe it will have a great positive effect. So we don't know so much about, about our students, about their lives, about where they can excel and where they can, lag behind. So I would make those, big judgments and big assumptions. Colleagues is an interesting issue. My graduate students who are teaching at USC, they are not really buying this idea yet. So they like the traditional approach, and understand why. So, but listen, we do what we can do. If you're director of the program, if you're one man or one woman show, great, you can do what you want. If you have to coordinate with colleagues, you have to get your chair's permission. You can educate them. You can, give them things to read. You can cite other examples. You could, and you could start small too. And I'll tell you later, ways to do it. But I realized that not everyone has the luxury of, and freedom to do this. But like I said, ungrading, gradeless approach usually does not violate any rules and regulations. But check with your CET, Center for Excellence in Teaching, or Center for Teaching and Learning. Talk to them and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Is that okay? So does that, comply with university policies, and see what they say.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I mean, grad students are notoriously tough graders, but yeah, thank you.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Ansley.
I'll be very brief because I actually had a similar question about colleagues, and because I tried to do something like this in the fall, and I was in charge of my own class, so I wasn't facing direct opposition, but I had students. It was a third year Russian class, and I had students who were clearly just really uncomfortable with this new situation. Students who had been having a very strict regular grading system in previous levels of Russian, and when faced with ungrading, were just kind of constantly freaking out, maybe sort of like what Tatiana was talking about. And I was wondering if you mentioned earlier in your presentation that you're doing this project together with a colleague from Spanish, and I was wondering if you could just say a bit about maybe advice for how to implement this at scale, because it seems to me that success depends to some extent on that, like on at least within a department ideally, but even better if it's like the way a lot of language departments are doing things.
Sure. Yeah. Well, if you can, thank you, Ansley, for this question. If you can start a reading group. That's how our community, ungrading community, started at USC. This colleague, Lori, she come to me and say, hey, I would like to do this, group, and we would come together every month and discuss an article or discuss our own practices. And that's kind of we've found out more and more colleagues are doing it, and now we did a web page and collected some resources. So it's relatively easy to do. If it's hey, who is interested, even if it's like 2 or 3 people, you can still do a lot. And that's a kind of snowball effect. Can or invite colleagues from the neighboring universities and colleges and reach out to them and see if they could be interested in just talking about discussing this. As far as students who are resistant, yes, those students exist. So, well, if you want to give them grades on the homework, if that makes them comfortable, you still can do it, right? But also talking to them, explaining what you're doing, why you're doing this, and maybe asking what exactly they need, what exactly they're missing, what exactly they want from you. Is it actual grade, or grade as manifestation of something else? Maybe your feedback to them should be written a little bit differently, but help them understand what is it they need and they're missing, like why, and try to lay your arguments why your approach actually better.
Thank you. Olga.
Okay, I will try to be brief. I have 2 kind of questions, comments, and one is related to, I will start probably with the second one because it's related to what you were just talking about, motivation. So, and the purpose, why are they there? And yes, I feel that's what I've been doing. I've been doing ungraded in my language classes, and it worked fine. And I came to this kind of methodology for the same reasons as you have. But what I've noticed is that, first of all, if you have students who are there to learn the language, this works great, right? But if they're there for different reasons, for example, in some universities like ours, they have to complete language requirements, and they're there only for that reason. Or some students are doing this as they're seniors, they're graduating, and they have the last 4 credits to fill. And I've been having these students. They're taking only basically 1 semester or 1 year of the language just because they need the specific number of credits, and they just decided it is. So this is not motivating, right, to them. They don't care. They don't want to learn the language. They want the grade to graduate. So this is my issue with this, because I noticed that's a specific group of our learners nowadays that I cannot motivate through this ungrading and alternative grading and specs grading kind of methodology. The second question is about redos, and what I've noticed, I've been doing redos with students, so because we're doing complete and complete, also 80% baseline, and I realized that at some point, and I realized it only this semester, that this redo policy of mine, in a way, also is kind of creates some kind of there is an issue of inequity there, right? Because I have specific students who, let's say they didn't do well, they earned less than 80%, or they failed, or they didn't come or something, right? And I let them do this. And now I'm having problems because they're so busy, they have full-time jobs, they're applying for jobs, they have job interviews, they cannot, they tell me, I'm sorry, I cannot invest extra hours on all these redos because it's on top of what they were already doing. And now I realize that these students, there's a specific group of students who, for family, personal reasons, we have mature students, right? We have students who are commuters. For some reasons, they cannot invest this extra hours on redos or things like this. So how would you deal with these situations? And do you have any secret, any solution for that?
Yes, one secret that I'm gonna share with you now. Yes, Olga, these are all real questions. Motivation, is real, but I wonder if, again, we lay out our expectations clearly and our requirements. Again, there's still requirements, still expectations. You still need to do the work. And if we could ask students, maybe do that self-assessment check earlier in this semester. So are you, in all honesty, can you say that you honestly completed all my requirements for A? And if you're not, well, you have 2 options. You could improve, you could do better, you could, change your behavior, or you could do what you're doing, but you won't get an A, which is fine. But you should know and you should take responsibility for that. So maybe if you start doing those self-assessment earlier in the semester, week 3, week 4, kind of do it. I find that weekly self-assessment, students get tired and then get repetitive, and they just kind of lose the focus. But maybe do it, every 3 weeks, every 2 weeks. That could be a solution. As far as redo, yes, some students are really resistant to doing this redo, but maybe we could do redo could take a different shape. Maybe it could be just a half-an-hour meeting with you when you do it kind of when they have to, instead of spending hours doing it at home, but they will meet with you, and that could be a sort of a simpler way for them to redo this assignment, or they could redo some of it, redo one portion, one task. Yeah, I don't have. I've seen those students. They've come to me, but I would still say, well, tough luck. You still have to redo if you want an A. That's my requirement. That's on the syllabus. Again, we are still teachers. We're still instructors. We still set a lot of rules. So it's okay for us to say, well, but again, explaining why we're doing this, but also students would just admit the consequences if they don't do it, and that's okay.
Can I read quickly from the chat before Maya goes? So Corey suggests maybe this would work better beyond first year to avoid those who aren't interested in learning. That's a question. And then Ansley, yeah, meanwhile, I was just thinking that maybe especially first year, because the gains are more obvious and so greater motivation to be self-motivated.
Yeah, we all teach in different places, and Corey, your first year students might be different than Ainsley. So yeah, but I was doing it in a state college, 25 students in the first year class online in Zoom. Students were like folding laundry in the Zoom session, and it worked. Still worked. Again, bell shape, it does its magic.
Maya, maybe the last question, comment before Evgeny continues.
Thank you so much, Evgeny. Thank you so much for all the questions. I really like how you presented it to us, what ungrading actually means. I'm interested if you agree with me or not. This is what I heard. It's actually this balance between the philosophy of teaching that each of us bring up into classroom and set of practices. So if we jump into details of that practice and that practice, losing what we actually bring, we focusing on something else. So each of us is different. We all teach different classes. We all come to different priorities, goals, and so on. And what you bringing up, it's actually, and you said that each of you would have different set of rules and expectations and so on. And I like that, and I like it a lot. It means I will be changing it, and I will have different colleagues and different acceptance of that approach. And with different small or big, well, let's be realistic, small group of students lately, it would be different, and it will be different type of challenges. So, bravo. I'm inspired, as always.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Maya. Shall we? I just have a few more slides to show you and to talk about a quick survey that I did with my students asking them how did this approach to teaching affect your learning, and ask them to comment on all positive and negative aspects of it. I had 26 respondents, not a huge sample, but still tells us something. And they come from 4 US universities of various size, and I used in vivo to sort of analyze the results. So the students were the positive were the themes that emerged from the study. It allowed them to focus on learning. It brings less stress and creates a more positive, authentic class environment. They have better motivation, and it allows for more risk-taking and positive effect on productive skills. So here are some quotes that I want to share with you. Most people who want to learn Russian generally want to learn. It feels pointless to make the class about a grade at the end rather than about learning. It allows students to focus more intensely on mastery of material. Students say that, learn without stressing over small things that I didn't understand yet. And again, going back to my statistics example, yes, certain things they don't understand, but we don't penalize them for being slow in their getting the material. Take enormous amount of pressure away from arbitrary grades. And I feel that a lot of stress over worrying about a grade allowed me to concentrate more on the aspect of Russian that I wanted to learn. Students also said that this format more closely reflects real-world experience in a second language, and I didn't feel like I was in school. I just felt like I got the opportunity to learn Russian and get better at speaking. So we were just doing the language. We just engaged in the conversation. We were doing the work, doing the whatever, reading, talking, speaking, writing. So that atmosphere I was, going for in the classroom. I think that this made a huge impact on my eventual decision to major in Russian, something we all like to hear, right? Because I was able to learn in a way that emphasized the actual language, which fostered a love of it that wasn't inhibited by academic stress. Finally, students commenting that it affected or improved their productive skills. They penalizing students with a poor grade and homework assignment may discourage them from speaking and writing freely and correcting mistakes afterwards. If I had to worry about getting points marked off, I would probably have written less and spend more time looking up grammatical rules. Again, so that might be our answer to ChatGPT, AI tools that students would be so tempted to use, still so tempted to use. As far as critical comments, again, motivation came up, a lack of clarity and confusion at the beginning. So here's what they said. There was almost like a lack of understanding between the Evgeny and I at first, because without any graded assignments, I felt like I couldn't tell how he was interpreting how well I was or wasn't doing, and therefore I had a hard time trying to gauge my grade in the class. But throughout the rest of the semester, it was pretty good, and the pretty frequent check-ins were good and helped calm my thoughts. So importance of feedback, importance of communicating your expectations, communicating what you're doing, why you're doing, and giving your feedback to students. So, so a few words about motivation. So it comes up in other studies on gradeless approach on grading. It motivates some students and demotivates the other. But I think the proportion of this motivated versus demotivated is kind of it's the opposite. So there are much less students who are demotivated by grades than those who are motivated. Right. So ungrading motivates more students than it demotivates. But it's real for some students. Like some of you were saying, it is a real thing. We just need to find a way to to do it. And again, engaging in dialogue, I think first thing we should do. So what's the feedback they gave me after those classes? Grading approach really hinges on strong, detailed feedback and commentary from instructor. Instructor was still sending me the edits and corrections and still prodding me to improve. Getting feedback without a percentage point staring you in the face makes it a little easier to internalize without becoming self-conscious. I always received feedback anyway, so it was always clear to me whether or not I was doing well in class and how much progress I was making. So the feedback is again a crucial element of graded classroom. So if you're going from grading less to gradeless, you could start small, you could start big. It's up to you. It's up to your institution, your context. You could start by renaming your tests and quizzes. You can call them checks for learning. You can literally call them show me what you can do. This is an example I found in our math colleagues. There's a Stanford math professor who is advocating for this, and that's the example of her the students doing this in their class. You can reconsider your attendance policy, and you can make it more flexible, make it more inclusive. Introduce self-reflections, even if you cannot ungrade anything or important things that you want to ungrade, include self-reflections anyway. Invite your students to comment on their progress, on the grade that they would like to receive, or they think they would receive. Explain, have them explain why they assigning this grade, and have them comment on the progress. Allow retakes, if only one. If you didn't allow retakes, allow one retake. See how it goes. Set a limit. Set 2 weeks. Set 1 week. Whatever feels comfortable. We're all very busy. If you're teaching 25 students, you can have many retakes. But at the same time, remember that not all students will come with those retakes. It will be a small percentage of those who would need it, and for some of them it might be very important, and they would really appreciate that. There are a couple of books that I could recommend if you teach in the K-12 environment. Going Gradeless, I think it's a great, very kind of accessible book to read that explains the strategies. Sort of a classic reader for college folks is Ungrading: Why Rating Students Undermines Learning and What to Do Instead. This book right here, edited by Susan Bloom, and I invite you to check the USC Center for Languages and Cultures website. We have some resources available, and our YouTube channel you'll find some 5-minute tips videos that we've been recording and will continue recording to kind of introduce various elements of ungrading. That's all I have to say today. Thank you. Yes, it is.
Sorry, navigating between 2 screens. Can I ask a question?
What?
While people are clapping. So a student says in the self-reflection, I deserve an A. I did everything. And then I think, no, not really. You deserve a B+. Not because I counted how many times you missed class, but just I was not floored by your performance in class. What happens then?
Well, first of all, I think we should remove the word deserve from our vocabulary. They deserve an A, yeah, just because they're just wonderful, brilliant, beautiful individuals, just because they know they're there. И мне не жалко, да, мне не жалко. I start, as you saw it in my syllabus, I start with an A. But there are specific criteria. So if you think that your students should not be getting an A, and they think they should, okay, so let's just go criteria.
So that's what I'm asking. So what
Point by
happens? Like, is it the meeting between the student and you?
It is a
you just
meeting.
go
Yeah.
Criteria, like criteria.
Yeah. So I would, so, okay, so you think it's A, okay, I respect your opinion. So let's just discuss why you think, okay, so here's the, criteria. Let's just go by one, can you comment on each, and tell me what your self-assessment for each. And then you don't have to, respond right away. Let them talk, let them explain. And then you could, maybe you will be convinced, maybe you won't be. And you still reserve the right to, you're the one giving the final grade. So, and you set up your, and the language in your syllabus can be written. So, okay, well, that's what I say. Your final grade will be based on your self-assessment, but I will have a final decision. So it should be very clear that you are the one. And I think university policies requires you to assign the grade, but having this conversation and dialogue with a student, open-minded and unprejudiced, often helps, and you'll learn quite a bit.
Thanks. Оля.
Okay, I always have two questions. It's my tradition. The first one is, have you encountered any problems or issues in mixed classes if you had like heritage speakers and non-heritage speakers? Because sometimes what happens is that they use their pre-existing proficiency in their advantage. So, and that's like, I mean, sometimes it can be confusing and more it complicates the situation, especially with situation with ungrading. And the second thing is the second question which I have. It's about the plagiarism and ungrading. So you said yes, the original idea is to discourage them from plagiarizing, right? And let's say they continue doing this, right? So, and each university has specific policies, right? And they're connected to our student code of conduct and all this stuff. And there are specific procedures, and this is like strictly imposed by the dean's office and stuff like this, right? So if they say, let's say they plagiarize once and they plagiarize twice, there is specific procedures you have to follow. So you have at some point you have to fail and maybe to make them fail the whole course. How does it, and I know these policies are completely kind of unjust and do not follow the principle of DEI, but there are these policies. The university, how do they work, and how do you integrate them, or how do you make them work together with ungrading strategies?
Sure. Well, university policies, I cannot really violate them. And if university says students must be expelled if they cheat, and I find this cheating serious and kind of consistent, I will report them, because I have to obey the rules. Ungrading is not, solution for people who are dishonest. And I will not tolerate dishonesty, and I will try to find out what's happening, what's going on. And, I had a situation when a student was doing something, but he was insisting that he was not. It stopped, but he would not admit that he was doing something illegal. But I was really after him. You have to, I think it looks like you were cheating, and you shouldn't be doing this. So that's the academic crime that we're not allowing under no system. As for heritage students, I didn't find, that's a different kind of a story, right? How we differentiate instruction and how we set the requirements and the curriculum so that both groups of students benefit and learn from it. And I always had mixed classrooms in all my courses in first year and third year and second, but heritage students would still be, subject to the same standards and to the same rules. If I didn't change my classroom so they are, learning differently, that's on me. But in terms of policies, it was not different.
If anything, it probably would make our lives easier.
Yeah,
Differentiating instruction is one thing, but this ungrading probably makes our lives easier when we have mixed classrooms.
Yeah, just a small clarification. It just happened like recently in our classroom is that when we gave in our ungraded language class, we gave students grades. The only one dispute came from a heritage speaker. And let's say he received like B+, and then he fought us because he said, I believe because of my proficiency, and he was proficient, right? I believe I deserve an A+ in this class because my language skills are above. And that's what I'm talking about.
Right. So catching them early, I think, is crucial. But also remember that, those outliers, they'll always be heritage and non-heritage. They will, but one student is not a reason for us not to do it, right? But we cannot foresee any and every situation that we encounter. But again, doing this checks early, I think, is a solution that I can only think of.
All right, well, we're 5 minutes before the hour, and I see a lot of notes in the chat, how inspiring this was and fantastic. And I want to join these voices and applause and to thank on behalf of all of us. Thank you, Evgeny, for doing this really inspiring and great webinar. And colleagues, I want to remind everyone, I already did once, but I want to remind everyone that next Friday, 5:30 Eastern time, we get together to continue this discussion and share practices, experiences, materials. And Evgeny, please come if you can, because there may be more questions after people have digested a little bit this material. And then also to remind everyone that we're going to follow up with another webinar on a related topic, which is feedback. And this webinar will be led by Olesya Kiselev, our colleague who was just here. And it's going to be on feedback. Feedback is very important to your feedback is very important to us. Feedback and assessment in the second language classroom. So
can I just say one word? Sorry.
Sure.
Yes, feedback. Oh, such a big topic. But I just want to encourage people to try new things, whether it's ungrading or not great or ungrading, whatever. Don't be afraid to break things. You will not break anything. Your students will still learn. They will still come to class. It will help you to feel better, get more connected to students, and just to enjoy our profession, enjoy what we're doing in class. So, but nothing is going to break, I promise.
Thank you. So I'm going to stop recording, but if anyone